Everybody's got an opinion on whether right now is a good time to buy a home in Grovetown. Your coworker says, wait, rates are too high. Your neighbor says, buy now before prices go back up. The national headlines are saying something completely different than both of them. Here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to ignore all of that, and instead, I'm going to walk you through the actual MLS data for the zip code 30813, that's specifically Grovetown by itself, pulled as of today, March 29th, 2026. It's not some national average, Realtor.com, Zillow, the big ones. This is Grovetown by itself in our local marketplace. So my hope is that by the end of this video, you're going to have a real answer of should you wait or buy based on the numbers and not the noise. So first things first, where are prices actually standing? Let's start with the numbers most people want to know. What are homes actually selling for in Grovetown right now? The median sales price as of February 2026 was $314,950. Now, if you've been watching this market, you might remember prices were a little higher earlier in the year, and they were. Back in May, June, and July of 2025, the median sales price were running anywhere from $324,000 up to as high as $340,000. So yes, prices have come down from that summer peak. Compared to February 2025, the median is down about a total of 3.6%, from $326,600 to a now $314,950. But here's what I want you to hear. This is not a crash. That's a correction from an overheated spring market back to something more grounded. And when you look at the year-to-date picture, the first 2 months of 2026 compared to the same period in 2025, the median is actually slightly up at $318,500 in 2026 compared to the $316,000 in 2025. So that's a less than 1% difference year over year. So what does that tell us? Well, that means prices in Grovetown softened from their peak and they've stabilized. We're not in a free fall. We're also not back at the highs. We're in a reset. And I'll explain in a minute why that matters for buyers and sellers differently. Next, how long are homes sitting? This is the metric I think that tells the most honest story about where a market is. And in Grovetown right now, it's telling a very clear story. In February 2026, homes were averaging 123.8 days on market before going under contract. February 2025, that number was around 104 days. That's a meaningful increase, not just slightly. And when you look at the cumulative days on market, which accounts for homes that were relisted after not selling the first time, February 2026 came in at 138 days, up 11% year over year. Now, year to date, the median cumulative days on market is sitting at 121 days in 2026, opposed to the 106 days in 2025. And that alone is up 14%. Now, let's contrast that with where the market was in 2025 during the summer. July had an average of just 89.9 days on market. That was the fastest pace for the entire year. The market was moving quickly, buyers were competing, and sellers had the upper hand. We are not in that environment anymore. However, I don't think we're that far from it. What this means practically is that if you're a buyer, you have more time to think right now. You can schedule a second showing, you can negotiate, and you can navigate this market with peace. You're not getting blown out of the water with 5 offers on the first weekend. If you're a seller, this is your reality check. Your home is not going to fly off the shelf just because you put a sign in the yard. Pricing strategy means more now than it did in the past 18 months, and really more than it has in the last decade. All right, now let's talk inventory. More choices than we've seen in a while. The supply, because of one of the biggest shifts in the Grovetown market compared to last year. In February 2026, there were 334 active listings in 30813 zip code, which is Grovetown entirely. In February 2025, there was only 274. That's a 21.5% increase in available inventory year over year. And it's not just a 1-month spike. Year to date, active listings are up nearly 14% compared to that same period in 2025. Now, one metric I want to talk to you through is the absorption rate, because I think it's the clearest way to understand what kind of market you're actually in. The absorption rate tells you that if no new homes came to market today, how many months would it take to sell everything currently available based on market trends? Well, in 2026, that number is 3.69 months. In 2025, the same month prior year, it was 2.89 months. So here's the context. Real estate professionals generally consider anything under a 3-month span to be a seller's market. It's low supply, high demand, sellers have leverage. Anything 6 months is considered an extreme buyer's market. So because we're in the 3 to 6 month range, it's a pretty balanced zone, but I would say that it actually errs because it's over 3 months towards the buyer side. At 3.69 months, Grovetown is sitting right on the balance range that's leaning towards the buyer side. Now, if you want to know how the competition is concentrated, look at the $250,000 to $349,000 price range. That is where a bulk of the active inventory lies, with about 120 homes combined sitting on the market in that range.
Everybody's got an opinion on whether right now is a good time to buy a home in Grovetown. Your coworker says wait, rates are too high. Your neighbor says buy now before prices go back up. The national headlines are saying something completely different than both of them. Here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to walk you through the actual local MLS data for the zip code 30813. That's Grovetown by itself, not Evans, not Martinez, Grovetown exclusively. This was pulled as of March 29th, 2026. There's nothing from Augusta, nothing in South Carolina, and there is no national average data in here. It is Grovetown. Now, my hope is that by the end of this video, you're going to have a real answer about the wait or buy question, based on numbers, not noise. Now, where do prices actually stand? Let's start with the number most people want to know first. What are homes actually selling for in Grovetown right now? The median sales price in February 2026 was $314,950. Now, if you've been watching this market, you might remember prices a little higher earlier in the year, and they were. Back in May, June, and July of 2025, the median sales prices were running anywhere from $324,000 up to as high as $340,000. So yes, prices have come down from that summer splurge that we saw. Now, compared to February 2025, the median sales price is down about 3.6%. So it went from $326,600 to $314,950. But here's what I want you to hear. This is not a crash. This is a correction from an overheated spring market back to something more grounded. And when we look at the year-to-date picture, the first 2 months of 2026 compared to the same period in 2025, the median is actually up slightly. $318,500 in 2026 versus $316,000 in 2025. Now that difference is less than 1%. So what does that tell us? Well, prices in Grovetown have softened from their peak and they've stabilized. We're not in a free fall. We're also not at summer highs. We're in a reset. And I'll explain in a minute why that matters for buyers and sellers differently. So how long are homes sitting? This is the metric I think that tells us a more honest story about where the market is. And in Grovetown right now is telling a pretty clear story. In February 2026, the homes were averaging 123.8 days on market before going on a contract. Now in February 2025, the number was around 104 days. That's a meaningful increase. And when you look at the cumulative days on market, which accounts for homes that were not just listed once, but relisted after not selling the first time, February 2026 came in at 138 days, up over 11% from 2025. Now year to date, the median cumulative days on market is sitting right around 121 days in 2026 versus 106 days in 2025. That number is up 14%. Now contrast that with where we were in summer of 2025. July had an average of just 90 days on market. That was the fastest pace of the entire year. We are not in that environment anymore. What this means practically is if you're a buyer, you have more time to think. You can schedule a second showing, you can negotiate. You're not getting blown out of the water by 5 other offers on the very first weekend. Now, if you're a seller, this unfortunately is a reality check. Your home is not going to fly off the shelf just because you put a sign in the yard. Pricing strategy means more now than it did 18 months ago. And truthfully, I would argue it means more now than it has in the last 10 to 18 years. Inventory, more choices than we've seen in a while. Let's talk about supply because that's one of the biggest shifts Grovetown market compared to last year. In February 2026, there were 334 active listings in the 30813 zip code. In February 2025, that number was only 275. Over year, that's a 21.5% increase of available inventory. Now, it's not just a 1 month spike. Year to date, active listings are up nearly 14% compared to that same period in 2025. Now, one metric I want to walk you through is the absorption rate because I think that is the clearest way to understand what kind of market we are actually in. What the absorption rate tells you is that if no new homes came to the market today, how many more months of inventory, or how many more months would it take to sell all the currently available inventory? In February 2026, that number was 3.69 months. That same number in February 2025 was just 2.89 months. Now here's the context. Real estate professionals generally consider anything under 3 to be a seller's market. Low supply, high demand, sellers have leverage in that type of market. Anything over 4 to 6 months is generally considered a buyer's market, where 6 months plus is considered an extreme buyer's market. Now, being that we're in between the 3 and 4 month range, it is considered to be more balanced and in the middle. At 3.69 months, Grovetown is sitting on the lower edge of a balanced buyer's market, just barely above seller's market inventory and leaning onto the buyer's favor. Now, if you want to know where the competition is concentrated, let's look at the $250,000 to $349,000 price range. That's where a bulk of active inventory lies for Grovetown, with about 120 homes combined sitting on the market within that range. If you're a seller priced there, you need to understand who you're competing against and why your home needs to stand out. One outlier worth noting is that the $650,000 to $699,000 segment has 0 active homes in February of 2025, and it jumped to 11 active homes in 2026. That's a massive jump for the upper tier, and it suggests that some sellers may have stretched their pricing into that range, so we'll see how it plays out over the spring market. Now, are sellers actually negotiating? Well, in short, more than they were, but not dramatically. The sale to list price ratio in February of 2026 was 99.1%. So on average, homes are closing at or about 99 cents for every dollar of asking price at the time of contract. That sounds pretty strong, and it is. Sellers are getting close to what they're asking for. But here's the more telling number. The sale to original list price ratio is 97.9%. That ratio that accounts for price reductions before the home goes under contract. So it takes the original list price and cuts it down to what they're at the time of contract. The gap between those two numbers, 97.9 versus 99.1, tells you that sellers are adjusting their price before they find a buyer and then closing near the adjusted price at the gap. January of 2026 was actually the weakest month in this data set of this metric, coming in at 96.7 sale to original list. So sellers in January were giving up more ground than any other month in the last 12 months. February rebounded a little, which is typical as the spring buying season starts to warm up. So here's the practical takeaway. If you're priced right from day one, you're still getting your number. If you overprice hoping to negotiate down, the data shows that strategy is going to cost you up to 3 or 4%. Now, where are buyer demand actually concentrated? I wanted to spend a moment here towards the end on the pending numbers because pending contracts are the real-time demand signal. These are the buyers who have made the decision. They have found the home, they wrote the offer, and they are under contract. In February 2026, there were 106 pending contracts in the Grovetown zip code. In February 2025, that number was only 90. That's an 18% increase in buyer activity going under contract year over year in February. Now, year to date, pendings are at 191 in 2026 versus 181 total in 2025, up 7%. So while the headlines might make you believe that buyers have disappeared, the data says otherwise. Buyers are active. They're just more selective. Now, here's where it gets really interesting is the pending numbers broken out by price range. The $200,000 to $249,000 segment had 17 pending contracts in February 2026 versus that same segment had just 9 in February 2025. That's nearly double. And the sold data confirms it. The same bracket had 15 closed sales in February versus 7 just a year ago. Entry-level pricing in Grovetown is moving. Now, the $300,000 to $349,000 range had the highest pending count of any bracket, 25 pending contracts, which is also where the bulk of the inventory sits. That's your most competitive segment right now for both buyers and sellers. And move-up buyers going from the $350,000 to $400,000 bracket are showing up. Pendings are up in that range over 35% year over year. So the takeaway for buyers is this. If you're shopping under $300,000, you still have that competition. That price point is active. But as we work our way into the upper tiers, Grovetown has continued to elevate its price point, and there's creeping demand and inventory in those higher price points. The higher you go, the less competition there are for buyers, and the more competition there are for sellers. So wait or buy? All right, you've sat through the data. Here's the honest answer. If you're a buyer, this is one of the better windows that you're going to have. The prices have pulled back from their peak in 2025. Sellers are more negotiable than they were, and homes are sitting longer, which means that you have time to actually make a thoughtful decision instead of writing offers in a panic. Rates are what they are. I can't control that. And neither can you. But the home price side of the equation is more favorable right now than it was in 2024 or the first half of 2025. And here's something I tell every buyer I work with. You can refinance a rate. You can't renegotiate the price you paid after the market moves back up. If you're a seller, you can absolutely still sell in this market. Homes are still transacting, buyers are still active, but the data is clear. You have to be priced correctly on day one, and your home needs to show well. The sellers who are struggling right now are the ones who came out overpriced and are now chasing a market down with reductions. Don't be that listing. Or they're the ones who did not get their home in show-ready inventory. They had weird smells, they were damaged. They needed to be optimized for the buyer because the buyer has options. So the final wait or buy verdict, if you're waiting for Grovetown prices to drop significantly before you jump in, the data just doesn't support that strategy. The correction has already happened, pricing's already softened from the peak in 2025, and they've stabilized. You'd be waiting for a move from a market that isn't signaling one is coming. Now, every situation is different. Your timeline, your financial picture, your specific neighborhood, all of that is very important. If you want to sit down and talk through what this data means for your specific situation, you can call or text me at 706-701-5940. I'm happy to pull comps for specific properties to where you're looking at buying or selling and give you a real answer. If this video helped you, drop a like and subscribe,